What's up, well, my Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power Season 2, premiering its first 3 episodes on Amazon Prime Video. It's been 2 years since Rings of Power was last on our screens, and I think Season 1, despite a lot of controversy, some of it earned, a lot of it not, I largely enjoyed Season 1 for what it was. I thought it was a pretty effective setup and a fun introduction to revisiting Middle Earth in a different time. Of course, this series set in the Second Age, long before the Peter Jackson films and Lord of the Rings book series. And despite my, general enjoyment of the series, it did seem to be a pretty polarizing and I'd say kind of unsuccessful start to this series. And I think part of that is due to expectations and hype that have been laid upon this. Allegedly, Jeff Bezos wanted this series to be Amazon's Game of Thrones, thus setting the bar incredibly high. The price tag Amazon spent both on production of the show and securing of the rights to even create it in the first place. And of course, the rights they did secure is not the entire, Tolkien IP. All of that's long been established at this point, but I think what was most concerning about season one was the fact that the show was not as popular as the most expensive show Amazon's ever created should be. And according to Kim Masters at The Hollywood Reporter, someone who actually knows things, only 37% of people that watched episode 1 of Rings of Power season 1 actually completed the series. And you think that for a big show, blockbuster show, you want that number to be a lot higher than that, obviously. I think what's most unfortunate about The Lord of the Rings of Power Season 2 is that through the first 3 episodes, Season 2 isn't doing a whole lot to right some of the wrongs and shortcomings of Season 1. I don't think this is a series that's particularly inviting to someone who's not very invested in the Tolkien lore. While I think the world building is quite successful, I like the production design, I like the style visually of the series, we're still lacking in, I think, consistent character development on a show that's this sprawling. There are storylines that are a lot less successful than others on this show. Me, as a big fan of Middle Earth, I can see where things are going, and I recognize characters and plot points and references, and that excites me as like a big fan. But I think to people that are more casual observers of Lord of the Rings and whatnot, there are still aspects of Rings of Power that are going to fall a bit flat, and that, unfortunately, I think the grace period with this show is beginning to run out. I, of course, am already in and invested in the show, so I'm not really speaking for myself here, but just more about broadly where the show is going to go, what's going to happen. I was really reflecting on what season 1. A lot of the most interesting things about it as a big fan to me all revolve around seeing things happen that I already know about, right? And I think season 2, in theory to me, was putting us in a place where the show could finally be what it wanted to be. In a sense that the mystery of, is Sauron on this show? Is Halbrand Sauron? We've moved past that now. Now Sauron is a direct threat on the show, and we get to see that out in the open. That's cool. I think the most successful stuff thus far on this series is revolving around Sauron's corruption and manipulation of Celebrimbor via his Anatar form, seeing the creation of the rings for the dwarves and for men, and seeing what that will bring and the negatives of that. That's what I want to see. Of course, the 3 elven rings created at the end of season 1. I'm most excited about seeing that, and basically seeing this show tell us about the lead up to the end of the Second Age. Of course, the famous battle we see in the prologue of the Lord of the Rings films, where Elrond tells Isildur to throw in the fire. We know the story. That's what we're building to. So I just really want to see that. And I think that is all plot that we know and get excited about. But we still need good story on this series. And I think a lot of stuff is still falling a bit flat. As much as I'm interested in seeing the fall of Numenor and seeing Numenor society, I don't really have a lot of connection or even an ability to follow the various political factions of what's going on with Numenor. That's still a bit opaque to me watching the show. Yes, it's cool to see an eagle show up, but apart from being oh, that's Isildur, and of course his father as well, those are famous characters we know. We know Numenor will fall. Palantir, I get the reference, etc., but I don't know, that's still a bit flat. I think a lot of Southlands, people, post the forming of Mordor, a lot of the Southlands characters still a bit flat to me. I like Morfydd Clark as Galadriel. I think she's still a bit stock, archetype style of a character, but I enjoy the presence. Of course, I like the Elrond presence as well. Hope we get more of that. In general, I'd love more time with the elves and elf society, Gil-galad, in his heyday is kind of cool to see. Conversely, like seeing the dwarves at Casa Doom and watching, seeing Moria in its former glory, that is cool. And this show is going to build us up to what happens with the Balrog, as we all know. There's not a lot of like suspense in terms of stakes on this show, so I just want to see like good execution. And honestly, like one of the funniest things to me in this premiere was watching, Elrond not be a fan of these three Elven rings and not want to support them at all, and rightfully thinking that they're part of a greater scheme by Sauron, right? And he runs away with the rings, and he goes to Círdan, the shipwright. Cool to see Círdan. I love it. The thing is, like, I already know that Gil-galad, Círdan, and Galadriel will get these three rings, and when Gil-galad dies, he gives his ring to Elrond, or Elrond gets his ring, right? So like, I just know like that that's like a stakeless like minor conflict on the show. And yeah, you can have that in there for people that don't know that, right? The more casual viewer, but I just don't feel like enough of the show is inviting to the casual viewer that it's worth even keeping something like that in, I guess. I did enjoy the beginning of this season where we have Jack Loudon in a cameo as Sauron in different form, really laying in Sauron's like shapeshifter, deceiver status. Of course, building us up to him assuming his Anatar form to start controlling Celebrimbor. Thought that was all pretty cool. That being said, I think the show could have done a better job of communicating why Sauron and the orcs aren't just immediately aligned as two different bad guys, so to speak. And this power struggle between Sauron and Adar, the dark elf who we met in season 1. Like, I don't think a lot of that's super well defined still. So, yeah, I think, like, overall, certainly most invested in the elf stuff, and of course, Sauron's control of things and involvement in things. I think the Numenor stuff and Southland stuff still feels very much like uninvolved from like the core story, because like we get like real narrative momentum in terms of the creation of the rings and whatnot. And if you're not directly involved with that on the show, it feels a bit superfluous, or at least like detached right now. I think you can certainly say that about the Stranger and the Harfoots, and we do seem to be getting some momentum about like who is the Stranger going to be. It's very clear at this point from the end of season 1 into now that he is an Astari of some kind. Is he a wizard we know? Is he a different wizard? There seemingly is another wizard off in that desert place who we saw. Again, are these people we know? Are these other people? I've long theorized that perhaps we would see the Blue Wizard characters on this show solely for the fact that they are undefined in the Tolkien lore and thus very open to interpretation on a show like this. Remains to be seen. But yeah, I think ultimately, like, it's a show that just has a lot of disjointed qualities to its narrative. So certainly things I like, certainly things I enjoy, but I'm having a hard time investing in all the storylines and threads equally. And I think that's something that, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon was able to really masterfully command in a way that the show still hasn't figured out. So I'll be very curious about the show's continued reception, continued popularity in terms of viewership, because Amazon feels so pot committed to creating this, right? Like, surely they're going to see this through to the end. I certainly would hope so, right? They stuck it out with Wheel of Time as well, despite not that show not lighting the world on fire either. So you would think Amazon, given its wealth, they could handle this, but I'd encourage people to read the Kim Masters article that references things going on at Prime Video, and that's where that 37% figure came from, because I think not all things are well at Amazon in terms of how things have been going, budgets, quality, etc. A lot to dig into if you don't know. But yeah, Lord of the Rings of Power Season 2, I'm curious how far we go with things, like, do we get into open conflict? Does the Balrog fuck shit up in totality? I don't know if we're going to get that far yet, so hopefully the steps we start to take feel fulfilling enough. But let me know where you at with Lord of the Rings of Power. Do you feel like season 2 is doing things you want? Let me know. And for more TV reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time.